Is this crazy? We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of Make America Great Again. How can you be against it?
Welcome to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, senior news anchor, here with Rhonda Colvin, senior political correspondent, and James Hohmann, columnist. We'll call you senior columnist, James. Today, we're focused on really one big story in Washington, the Trump administration's efforts to hugely downsize the federal government. And this is being led by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. They seem to be trying to hit the delete key on large swaths of the federal workforce and the programs that those people work for, including the Department of Education, foreign aid programs, and offices that were designed and created to protect American consumers. So we'll get into some of the huge federal programs that are now under threat and how gutting or outright eliminating them would affect people, both here in the United States and around the world. But let's start with the how. How are Elon Musk and DOGE taking over large parts of the government, and is it legal? James, what power does Elon Musk have as the head of this new entity, the Department of Government Efficiency?
Essentially, his power, to the extent he has it, comes through Donald Trump and the confidence of Trump. I think that there's this desire by Trump, certainly, to turn Musk into some kind of distinct entity, but essentially, he is doing Trump's bidding. They're the same person. I think it's a mistake to be like, Musk is doing this. It's really Donald Trump is doing it at the recommendation of Elon Musk. He is technically, we learned this week, a special government employee. Now, that is a designation that has been used during prior administrations. Anita Dunn, who was one of Joe Biden's top advisors, was a so-called SGE. A lot of people who worked for Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State had the same designation. It dramatically reduces the disclosure requirements, how much you have to put out about your financials, your conflicts of interest. It also limits how long you can serve. So the clock is basically you're allowed to do 130 days a year. So the conventional wisdom in DC is Musk is going to do this for 129 days and then quit so that he doesn't have to do all the paperwork and everything that would actually be entailed with becoming a full-time government employee. But I will tell you, he has a White House email address, and he really has essentially staged a hostile takeover of a bunch of agencies.
Rhonda, tell us more about what he can do in this capacity as a SGE, a special government employee.
Yeah, as James said, there is a time limit on it at 130 days that, according to the guidelines, that can be worked in any sort of way. So you could work, say, half a day and still have half a day to apply to another one of your 130 days. But it is supposed to be temporary. It does skirt some of the financial disclosures, ethics reporting that has to happen with federal workers. So that's sort of what it looks like they're getting around right now. I looked at the Federal Labor Authority's website on all the ethics and reporting that should happen when you have an SGE, but what it says is it's mostly done in good faith, on a good faith basis, that the person is supposed to, if they're working more than 60 days, put out a financial disclosure form. They're also supposed to not fundraise in certain ways that might benefit them. But they are given incredible leeway to have the type of power that Musk is showing right now.
So Musk was born and raised in South Africa. A lot of people are searching on Google, like, is he an American citizen, James? Because he is wielding a lot of power right now.
He is a U.S. citizen. He is ineligible to run for president. But he became an American a few decades ago, immigrated here during college.
So let's talk about what he's actually accessing and doing, because this has raised a lot of alarm bells.
So the Musk is famous in his businesses for this mantra of overcut and then build back. So that's his mantra is delete, delete, delete. And he did it at Tesla and SpaceX. And what he has decided to do is get control of the payment system. Ultimately, he has functionally seized control of the government's checkbook. I think that's a good way to think about it. So he went into the Treasury Department and got the payment system. So you see who's getting what payments. And as part of an effort to slash spending, he basically is saying, let's stop doing this payment, let's stop doing this payment, let's stop doing this payment. Now, some of that is contracts. Some of it is mandated by law. But his mentality is cut first, ask questions later. And so he started at Treasury. He's gone into various agencies and essentially tried to get access to the databases that tell you who's getting the money. And he very much is focused on stopping money from going out the door wherever it's in his interests, wherever it's possible.
Democrats have raised concerns about this, Rhonda. They have said this is not an elected official. Where is the boundary between this information being not to the level of like classified, but private, or information that just shouldn't be, eyeballed by anyone with a sort of a GSE level of government official status?
Yeah, I think that's what you're seeing raise so much alarm among Democrats who are saying, look, this is a position, the DOGE position and the special government employee position is one that doesn't have to go through Senate confirmation. It's not an elected position where people voted for you. And to have this type of access is really troubling. I think because it is unprecedented, we haven't really had this happen. There is a sense of what do we do with all of this, because there isn't a playbook yet to handle this. But we are seeing specifically Hill Democrats raise alarm in incremental ways. I do think that they are still shaping their response to this, but it does appear as if they can't do anything immediately. One person I'm watching is Jerry Connolly, who is the ranking Democrat, the top Democrat on House Oversight. This was earlier this morning that he announced that House Democrats are expanding an investigation into Trump and Musk attempts to access data and information, some of the sensitive material James was just saying. But because this is kind of just something that we really have not seen before, I think it is taking a lot of time for everyone to catch up to figure out what can be done.
When we think about Musk's role, one of the roles that he's playing for Trump is as enforcer. He is really out there, kind of the heat shield. Someone in the Trump White House told one of our colleagues that he's doing Trump's so-called dirty work. One of the most interesting and revealing windows into what he's doing right now, on Sunday afternoon, he tweets, Todd Young, Republican senator from Indiana, is a shill of the deep state. A few hours later, he deletes that tweet. Then a few hours after that, he tweets, had a great conversation with Todd Young. He's fully on board with the MAGA agenda. And then today, Tuesday, Todd Young comes out and at the last minute announces that he's going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard to be the director of national intelligence. So remember, this is someone who, the richest man in the world, spent nearly $300 million electing Trump. And clearly he had a conversation with a senator on Sunday and basically, for lack of a better term, cyberbullied him into reversing himself on this key vote. And so ultimately that's sort of soft power more than hard power. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, how long is that going to last?
Okay, well, there's the soft power, there's the cyberbullying, or playing politics. I mean, people have done that. Presidents have done that, arm twisting and things like that, just maybe not on social media, not sending an army of Twitter trolls after you. But then there's accessing government information and records, and who Elon Musk is having do that with him. How legal is this?
It is. You have to be careful, not to say something is illegal, but it is very likely illegal. Or it is very likely, I should say, the White House says no laws are being broken, that they're carefully complying with everything. It is very difficult to imagine that laws aren't being broken vis-a-vis access to really confidential personal privacy information. And the problem is that Congress isn't going to do anything about it. The Justice Department isn't, for now, going to do anything about it. So who is? Maybe lawsuits by government employees, government contractors. But it does appear that they're being pretty willy-nilly about handling really sensitive material. And we've also seen there's like 4 young guys who are involved with DOGE who work with Elon Musk. They're being called the Doge Bros, the Muscovites, the Musketeers, whatever you want to call them. But these are not full-time government employees. Mm-hmm. They're also quite young. And it's very possible that they're putting personal data on private proxy servers, and that those servers don't have the same kind of security protections that some of the government servers do. We just don't know.
Who do those guys work for?
And they ultimately work for Elon, but this is one of the problems is we don't know. And I think this is one of those things where it's going to end up being clear that they weren't, following the regulations and the letter of the law. But we won't know that for sure for a while.
I will add about lawsuits, that does appear to be one of the perhaps faster ways if there is concern about Elon's influence. I know DOGE is facing a suit, and that was filed, I think, hours after the inauguration. It was based on a 1970s era law that says there needs to be transparency if there is an executive level advisory committee or someone advising the president, then there needs to be more transparency. So DOGE is under a lawsuit, as well as the attempts to get that information from the Treasury Department. I know that government worker unions have also filed suit on that. So it does appear that might be maybe the most effective way to address this, although those things will likely take time and be battled in the court system. But they are out there.
And we've certainly seen Donald Trump having success with drawing out a legal process. And we don't know what judges, there are a lot of judges that might be amenable to his arguments of having strong power come from the executive branch. So it's sort of funny when Rhonda says it's a quick process, because it could actually be a very long process, but it just shows
it may be quicker than Congress.
how little is actually being done. So let's talk about what officials have done to try to push back at some of these access issues and things, James.
Yeah, so various people have tried to not give over the keys to some of the most sensitive information in government, and they have been put on administrative leave or sidelined or shut out of buildings. The Musk landing teams, essentially, at all the agencies are often working out of the suites of the top people in their departments. I was talking to a Biden administration guy yesterday who said that Musk people are working out of his office at one of the agencies. But I think that they've just kind of come in and they are demanding all this information. Some people are complying, some people aren't. And they right now have basically been able to steamroll past anyone who's tried to stop them or kind of not give them full access to material.
Let's listen to how Donald Trump has talked about Elon Musk and what he sees as Musk's ability to access all this information and make these decisions.
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him. And it's only if we agree with him. He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs. And we put him in charge of seeing what he can do with certain groups and certain numbers. Some of the numbers are horrible, what he's found. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval. And we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. But he reports in, and it's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running, obviously, a big company. It has nothing to do with, there's a conflict that we won't let him get near it. But he does have a good natural instinct. He's got a team of very talented people. We're trying to shrink government, and he can probably shrink it as well as anybody else, if not better. Where we think there's a conflict or there's a problem, we won't let him go near it.
Donald Trump talking in the Oval Office on Monday. Those conflicts have to be proven, James. It's not just like a take your word for it. What evidence is the White House giving that there aren't conflicts of interest?
None. I mean, they're just saying there aren't. And ultimately, I think you should think of Elon Musk as an octopus, right? Who has his sort of tentacles in all these different areas of government. But he also is one of the most conflict-ridden people in American life. I mean, he owns a series of companies that depend on government contracts. SpaceX, which controls Starlink, a major defense contractor, major NASA contractor. One of the reasons that Musk wanted the FAA administrator gone right when Trump took over was because the FAA had fined SpaceX for launching rockets when the FAA had said that it wasn't safe to. And so that's a pretty clear conflict of interest. Same thing with Tesla, various regulations that affect Twitter or X. And so he has all these conflicts, not to mention other investments and holdings. He's advocating against the government in South Africa as a native South African. He's pushing his own agenda, even though he's working for Donald Trump.
And we'll talk more about how Democrats are reacting to that, Rhonda. But first, let's just talk about these agencies or organizations that Musk and his team are like kicking down the door of and trying to do everything they can to stop their work. And in some cases, get rid of the employees in the federal government. What is he targeting?
Well, I think the big news this week is, especially here in Washington, was USAID and how DOGE apparently has targeted the workers there. The office was closed. I know we had some reporters down there who were able to see that. That was highly concerning. And of course, that is an independent agency that was set up in the Cold War era in response to the Cold War by JFK. So it is something that has received federal funds from Congress, set up by Congress, but it was also set up first as an executive, through an executive order through JFK. So this is a real agency doing things. And right now we've seen humanitarian aid, all sorts of programs related to healthcare across the world globally come to a halt. So that is something we can trace back to DOGE's efforts of, tightening up and closing things down.
Marco Rubio, head of the State Department, Secretary of State, says that he's now going to be the acting director of USAID. What are the practicalities of this, Rhonda? How can you just take it over?
Well, I think this is something that you will probably see some Democrats fight back on. He has been, as you said, named acting director. There have been efforts and discussion before to bring this agency, this independent agency, into the State Department. So having right now the State Department be, kind of the group giving oversight to it is something that has been discussed. We'll see where it goes, but I don't think we know yet.
What else has he gone after?
He's also gone after the Department of Education. So they're looking at ways to, as Trump promised on the campaign trail, end the Department of Education to basically merge its various legally required functions with other agencies. So there's a Civil Rights Division in the Department of Education. They want to put that at the Justice Department. There's the Student Loan Division. They want to put that in the Treasury Department. And then the other thing that Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, did was basically stop all work at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This was one of the major creations after the 2008 financial crisis as part of the Dodd-Frank overhaul of banking in 2010. And they fired Rohit Chopra, who was the head of CFPB under Biden. And Bessent, just like Rubio, is now acting director. And he has said, stop any new rules, stop any fines on banks. And so it's just sort of an effort to basically slam the brakes on these things.
And many critics and those who are concerned about this see what's happening at USAID as like the test, right? Let's see how much we can do, how much chaos we can create, how much distraction we can cause, and then we move on to other departments and we'll see if it gets a reaction. What is the reaction, Rhonda? What are Democrats doing?
Well, one thing I have heard in sort of chorus from both House and Senate Democrats is that we're taking a look at this. We're going to use everything in our toolkit. The toolkit right now is pretty low. There isn't a lot that Congress can do right now. They can, of course, do those incremental
Democrats can do.
Right, that Democrats can do. Yes, if they were working together in a bipartisan manner, and we might see that. I don't know where this is going. But right now, Democrats are pushing back mainly with their messaging. But I think this goes to show, too, that, again, this is unprecedented. They don't really have a playbook for this right now. I mentioned about Jerry Connolly. He might be somebody to watch on the House side because his committee does have oversight over the federal government. So you might see some moves there. Of course, they're doing this investigation. We'll see where that goes. I also noticed today that Maxine Waters, who is on House Financial Services, she relaunched a website where whistleblowers can come forward and, raise flags about any abuses they're seeing that are, targeting federal workers or just abuse of government. So they're just little small things. But
Democrats were out at USAID on Monday. They plan to be out at the Treasury Department today. They're talking about not approving any, not voting for any of Trump's nominees. But
they can slow it down, but eventually the process does have to happen. So yeah, that is one of the threats too, is to slow some of these nominations
what
down.
could Republicans do?
They could work with Democrats just as a, legislative branch, pass laws that may curb, special government employees or maybe tightening up what that exactly is. They can do work in protecting the federal workforce. I mean, if if Congress worked all together, yes, there are possibly things that could be done that are measurable and have real impact. But of course, we're in this highly polarized climate.
What do you see that Republicans could do, James, if they were so inspired to?
If something like PEPFAR, for example, which was one of George W. Bush's greatest triumphs, literally has saved millions of lives. I think that they can.
Explain what PEPFAR is.
PEPFAR is an effort to combat AIDS by basically distributing medicine and other care for people in Africa. And it has been a huge success. The return on investment has been incredible. And it was one of the things that was frozen. And some Republicans like Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Jerry Moran from Kansas, basically went to Trump and said, you've got to lift this restriction, and he did. There's still some question about if it's fully lifted and for how long, but Republicans have some leverage to basically demand things if they're willing, especially to work with Democrats and say, if you don't do this, I'm going to partner on something or vote against this nominee. So there's some effort to kind of get, and I should say, Marco Rubio is out there saying if it's important and advances U.S. interests, we'll start spending the money again. In the past, he's been supportive of foreign aid. Marco Rubio a few years ago noted that foreign aid is like 0.8% of the federal budget, and that it is so there's some reason to believe that they just kind of want to take some wins and grab some low-hanging fruit and then restore kind of the big ticket projects. That's when you talk to Republicans on the Hill, they say they're maneuvering behind the scenes to make that happen. But of course, we'll see if it actually does happen. And if it doesn't, whether they're willing to stand up and challenge Trump, because thus far they haven't.
I've been talking to sources who work within USAID or work with companies that get funding through USAID to do projects around the world. And they are talking about this as a cataclysmic event, a once in a generation shift. They expect to be furloughed. They expect their careers to be over, and the passion projects they've spent their careers on, whether it's maternal health or AIDS in Africa, as being really blown up at this point. So they see a direct impact. A pause, in their words, equals the death of people in foreign countries. So let's talk about the impact.
Yeah, and I it is hard to overstate what a win this is for America's adversaries. China is spending so much money to achieve what a lot of the U.S. foreign aid does. It is, we're in this battle for the soul of the world. It is a new Cold War. Literally, the Kremlin is celebrating. I think we actually have a tweet we can put up on the screen for those watching from Dmitry Medvedev. He is Putin's number 2, and he says, the smart move by Elon Musk trying to plug USAID's deep throat, let the notorious deep state doesn't swallow him whole. Let's hope the notorious deep state doesn't swallow him whole. And Mike McFaul, who was the U.S. ambassador to Russia during Obama's term, said, literally, Putin shut down USAID in Russia in 2012. If they're so ineffective, why did Putin fear their activities in support of anti-corruption, market reforms, rule of law, and human rights? I talked to another Republican this morning who was saying that USAID's one of the biggest countries that gets support is Jordan. The King of Jordan and his wife are coming next week for Trump's second foreign visit, and the USAID is basically funding the agriculture and the arable land and sending advisors to make sure that they can grow crops to prevent instability in Jordan, because if that country fell, it would be disastrous for the Middle East. And it's a relatively small investment that is a lot more effective when you think of like dollar for dollar return than having a lot of U.S. troops stationed in a country.
Now, important to point out, this is exactly what Donald Trump said he would come into office and do.
Yeah.
And so that is what he is doing. I do want to play what Senator Chris Murphy said yesterday to our colleagues, Jorge Ribas and Annalise Roy. This is outside the USAID headquarters. Democrats in the House and Senate had come down to speak out against this. Here's how Senator Murphy believes this will have fallout.
This has nothing to do with efficiency. This is about destroying USAID. This is about withdrawing American power around the world in order to elevate Russia and China. Why is Musk and Trump so focused on doing China and Russia's business? Is this about making money? Is this about some other agenda? You can't explain this through American interests. I don't think it's a coincidence that Elon Musk has enormous business interests in China at the same time that he is dismantling the agency that every single day tries to reduce Chinese influence around the world.
We've talked about foreign aid. How else will these potential shutterings of programs or cuts to programs affect Americans?
I think right now you're going to see just a lot of chaos. And I know we've widely reported, as well as other news organizations, that the chaos happening within the federal workers who work in these agencies, they don't know what they can do, what they can't do, if they have a job tomorrow. That really could just gum up the system. So whatever agency is right now in the sights of DOGE or the Trump administration when it comes to dismantling the federal government, people may start seeing things move a lot slower that they care about. And we'll see.
Like what?
The Department of Education is one of them. We've talked about that. Think about how many student loans that are out there right now. And are people who have student loans concerned? It has widespread, tentacles was a great way to put it, just widespread effects. And I don't think we are there yet where we can see specifics, but you will feel it if the federal government isn't working properly.
Yeah, I went to my dry cleaner this morning and she said that her daughter lost her job. She was a contractor working on DEI projects in the government, was laid off. I had lunch with a Democratic congressman yesterday, and he was very downbeat. And he was saying, there's so much happening. We are struggling with what to focus our energy on, what to fight about. Do we go to the USAID headquarters today, but are we missing something that is really also important and that is slipping through the cracks? Or are we not explaining, foreign aid is one of those things that's traditionally, long before Trump, been hard to explain to a lot of everyday Americans, like why it helps them to spend this money. But, I think Democrats on the Hill are really grappling with where to focus, and they feel like their base isn't motivated and fired up the way they were 8 years ago. So it's this DC very much, when you go and you chat with people around town, does feel under siege, which, to your point, Libby, that was what Trump ran on, and that very much is the aim of what they're doing.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Sidebar. Thanks so much for joining us. This was our 50th episode. Somehow we've already hit the 50th mark. Rhonda, you found out that the 50th anniversary gift is gold. So we'll have to give each other some gold Hershey's kisses or something later after this show. Really appreciate both of you for being here and breaking this down. We're going to keep talking about what all of this will mean for federal workers in coming episodes. And we're seeing so much movement. Please do look at the Washington Post for the latest reporting on just how this is impacting Washington, D.C., but also communities around the country, because federal workers are all over America, not just in the D.C. area. I'm Libby Casey. Rhonda and James, thank you so much. We'll see you on Thursday.